The Section High Alpha. In this video, we'll cover the Section High Alpha from the number 6 opposing solo perspective. The solos are in the spotlight again on this maneuver, and you'll be flying low and slow, providing a stellar photo op for the crowd. Seeing two F-18s line abreast, standing on their tails, is one of the most impressive moments in the entire demonstration, and really shows off the Hornet in its favorite flight regime, high angle of attack. Because you will be spending so much time in front of the crowd on this one, they also have plenty of time to notice any little mistakes, so you have got to fly this to perfection. Your lead again, which means it's up to you to get it right. There's nothing worse than having to knock it off early in the high alpha. Briefing. The maneuver starts similar to the inverted tuckover roll, with both jets transiting behind the crowd to set up for an ingress from crowd right. At 3.2 nautical miles, the section pulls power back to idle and begins an easy left-hand turn towards show center, descending slowly throughout the turn in order to roll out on the show line between 3 and 4 nautical miles from center point and at 500 feet AGL. During the rollout, number 5 shifts to the line abreast formation on number 6's right wing, and the section continues to bleed speed down to less than 200 knots using the air brakes. The air brakes are then retracted, and the formation continues to decelerate to just above stall speed. You will notice the angle of attack, also known as the alpha, increasing as the speed drops, requiring more backstick pressure to keep the aircraft in the sky. The objective is to maintain level flight throughout the maneuver at no lower than 300 feet AGL. At 140 knots, both pilots pull the aircraft toward the sky, establishing between a 20 and 25 degrees nose-high attitude, bringing on power to maintain level flight while standing the jet on its tail. At 1 nautical mile, number 6 will call for smoke on while both aircraft maintain this high angle of attack flight regime across center point. At 0.3 nautical miles beyond center point, 5 calls knock it off and both pilots select full afterburner. Number 5 levels their nose and accelerates along the show line, while number 6 pulls into a 60-degree vertical climb, showcasing the powerful General Electric F404 afterburning turbofans, producing a combined total of 36,000 pounds of thrust. Number 6 then rolls the jet onto its back and hangs inverted for a few seconds before dropping back in to rejoin number 5 behind the crowd. This maneuver takes you right to the edge of the Hornet's flight envelope, but it is also one of the most impressive parts of the show, which really highlights the strengths of the FA-18C. Learn the numbers, fly the numbers, and you will blow the crowd away. Let's get into the details. Walkthrough. Hello, and welcome back to the office. That is the cockpit of the F-18C Hornet, and I'm calling it the office because we're about to do some work today because we're walking through the Section High Alpha maneuver, and this maneuver requires you once again as the number 6 opposing solo to be the lead pilot of the formation. Just like the inverted tuckover roll before it, you are the lead pilot, which means that you have to communicate your control input information and fly a smooth and consistent profile throughout the maneuver in order to give number 5 the best chance of staying in formation and making the maneuver look really good. And once again, he has a very tall order before him because he has to fly in formation, line abreast at a high alpha flight regime, which is an extremely unstable flight profile. And so he's got a lot of work ahead of him. So we need to do everything we can to make his job and his life a little easier. But as you can see, here we are. We are flying on a crowd right heading, which again, if we're flying directly crowd right, would be 244, but I like to give myself a little extra horizontal offset to make turn-ins easier, so I'm flying 250. And we're looking to come to about 1,000 feet AGL before we begin the turn, so we can sight the field easier and we can turn in and find the 500 feet that we want to be at once we're entering the show box. So we're going to be making a smooth arcing turn to the left to intersect the crowd line, and we want to be basically right on it or just a little shallow crossing center point so that we give ourselves some extra room, because we cannot fly over the crowd. That's dangerous. It's a crowd violation, so we want to give ourselves the best shot to not do that. We are also flying at about 380. That's the contract airspeed for this transit behind crowd here. And that is what number 5 will be expecting for his rejoin following the inverted tuckover roll. And the high alpha is performed at just above stall speed at 150 knots. So we need to lose a lot of airspeed in that turn. So we're going to be expecting to do that as well. Let's check over our shoulder and make sure that number 5 is in position. Sure enough, there he is right on our wing. So we're ready to begin the turn, and we'll begin the turn at right about 3.5 nautical miles. So let's unpause and get to the maneuver. So we're coming up to that turn-in point, 3.5 miles. And I will have also called our maneuver over the main show frequency. Solos are behind the crowd setting up the section high alpha, and we'll get a response from 5, probably just his call sign. That way everybody knows what we're up to. And then we're going to be turned in here at about 3.5 nautical miles. So we're about to start. Calm and left, real smooth. We're also decreasing power to idle very smoothly and beginning a little pull. And I actually keep power just above the idle stops, give a little room for number 5 to be able to maneuver. And we're just bringing it real smooth around the turn. And you'll remember that away from crowd heading is 154, so about when I hit that, I'm going to be sighting over my shoulder to look for the crowd and make sure our lineup is looking good. And it is. Keep bringing it in smoothly, no large corrections, no crazy maneuvers, just smooth and consistent and predictable. Right around here, we're going to ease the pull, roll and out, which indicates that we're doing a real smooth rollout. And there we are, pointed right towards center point. And right around now, you can hear I've brought out the speed brake as well. And when I bring out the speed brake, I will call stand by the boards, because the speed brake looks like a board. You can see them there. So the radio call is stand by the boards, boards. And on the word boards, that's when you pop the speed brake out. And we do that because we need to get down to 140 knots. So we're about 100 knots fast. So we got to do that in the next mile and a half or less. We're also at about 520 feet. Anywhere between 500 feet and 300 feet is acceptable for this maneuver, depending on your comfort level flying the profile. You will have a tendency to drop altitude once you get into the high alpha regime, and so take that into account as you're learning this. But when you get more comfortable, you'll be able to catch it and you'll learn how to do that. But at this point, again, as always, when we're flying lead, just smooth, consistent, predictable. We're just going to be losing that airspeed, losing a little bit of altitude, and bringing it in towards center point as consistently as we can. I want to point out another thing here, which is that you can see that we are not directly on center line. 064 would be that center line angle, and you can see we're just a little bit shallow of that, but that's okay because we want to be pointed away from crowd just in case anything goes wrong. If we're pointed toward crowd or we drift towards crowd, that's a crowd violation. It's dangerous, it's bad. We don't want to do that. So we want to give ourselves a little bit of wiggle room for error just in case something goes wrong, because there's a lot of things that could go wrong. We're flying slow, we're flying just above stall speed, we're low, and number 5 is right off our wing. He's flying abreast, and he's also flying at a very difficult flight regime. So we want to be thinking with safety in mind. All right, let's continue and see how the rest of this goes. So we're bringing it down. I'm going to call a little pull to level to try and bring the nose up to level, intersect the altitude. I was looking for 400 on this pass. And then right around 200 knots, we're going to call stand by the boards. Boards, which indicates that we're going to bring the boards in. And then I'm just going to fly the rest with throttle. It's going to be pretty close to idle, but I want to leave a little bit of room in there for number 5 to maneuver, and we also don't want to lose airspeed too fast because then we won't be able to collect it. We're going to continue to bring in more and more pull as the jet slows down to keep the nose level and not lose too much altitude. And we're calling our airspeeds as we're coming in. 160, 155, 150. And then when we get to 145, we're about to begin the maneuver, and then at 140, we will call pull into the set, which means we pull nose high and bring in the power, and then between 20 and 25 degrees nose high is where we're going to want to set the jet. And that is the high alpha regime we want. And the alpha is the angle of attack. It's the difference between where the nose is pointed and where the jet is flying. And the difference right now is between 20 and 25 degrees. It's probably about 23 degrees here. We're going to try and catch the jet and hold the nose at that high angle of attack, which is what gives the maneuver its name, and it also looks friggin' cool. Now, you probably have noticed already that there's one major complicating factor, and I'm going to zoom in here so we can get a better look at the HUD. There's one major complicating factor for us right now. What is it? It's this big ball of burning gas, which is the sun, and it's right where we want to be looking. You can't see it right now because it's occluded by the brightness of the sun because we're basically staring right at the sun here. But there is a vertical velocity indicator right above your altitude indicator on the HUD, which is what we want to be paying attention to. And you're probably thinking, now, Brother Leb, if I can't see this, how am I supposed to pay attention to it? Well, that is one of the reasons why I put the HUD on one of my MFDs. So I have a repeated set of instruments that I can use to fly this profile. You could also use the steam gauges down here. That means you're looking really far down, and I think it's very uncomfortable, and I don't like to do it, but you could, and that's what those gauges are for. You've got a vertical velocity indicator here, you've got your ADI here, and you could fly this profile using those steam gauges. I like to use the repeater HUD here, which gives you the exact same information that you would see on the HUD here, but instead it's just a little bit above your right knee. So this right here, the vertical velocity indicator, is what we're trying to neutralize. We want to keep it from moving too far from zero. Anywhere between -100 and +100 is acceptable. And if you're going to err in one direction or another, err in the direction of climb. So you want positive numbers rather than negative numbers if you can. So if you're not able to get it there and settle it down, then at least be climbing whatever you're doing. But we're looking to work this to as close to zero as we can so that way we're not losing any altitude here. This number of 360 is staying consistent because we do not want to fall into the ground. Don't worry about this. The jet will take care of that on its own as long as you're able to keep the profile yourself. You will need a decent amount of backstick, not tons, but you will need to continue back pressure. You will also need a little bit of leftward pressure, at least the way that my hand throttle position, and I have split throttles, tends to be, the jet tends to want to fall off to the right because naturally as I'm pulling with my right hand, I pull slightly to the right because it's my right arm. So you're going to need a little bit of left pressure to keep the jet from falling off to the right into number 5, who's flying abreast from us. And also it helps to have just a little bit of extra power on the leftward throttle in order to make sure that that engine is providing a little bit more power that you can kind of push against so that way you're not drifting right or left as you're doing this maneuver because you're standing the jet on its tail, and so it's going to want to fall off one direction or another. And you're going to need to try to keep it as consistent and stable as possible because number 5 is trying to fly formation off of you while doing the exact same thing, and it's extremely difficult for him. Once we get the jet settled and this vertical velocity indicator is not moving a whole lot, we just stay there. We just try and keep it pinned in that position, in that flight regime, all the way across center point and all the way to 0.3 nautical miles on the other side of center point. As soon as we get into that high alpha profile, once we call pulling to the set, we'll call setting it, which means we've got the nose angle where we want it, and we're going to bring power in and try and catch the jet. And then we're going to call smoke on before the 0.5 mile mark, because that means we're over the field and we want the crowd to know where we are and to see us and look at how glorious and beautiful our high alpha is. And then we're just going to hold it there all the way in. And you just got to be rock solid. So here we are. You can see that we're climbing a little bit, so I'm going to ease a little power, let it settle, and then when it starts to settle down like this, you got to bring a bit more power back in to catch it. And then there we go, we kind of caught it. So here we are, we're in the profile we want. We're just trying to keep it from adjusting too much. Keep it as close to the 0 as we can. Just lots of minor corrections. And I'm struggling a little bit. You can see I'm struggling a little bit. You can see a little bit of rightward drift. Try and catch that little bit of left stick. Just keep it going. Keep it smooth. All right, we're about to cross center point, called center point. And then once we cross center point, and once we're that 0.3 nautical miles beyond center point, you can see here, number 5 will then take the lead, and he will call when we cross center point, because he's going to be looking over his left shoulder, and we'll be able to see when that happens, because he's line abreast from us. Here we can take a peek at him. Here he is. Look at him, and he'll be looking at us, and he'll be able to tell when we've crossed center point. And then once we get to that 0.3 nautical miles, he will call knock it off, which means end the maneuver, and then he will clear straight ahead, full burner, because he's going slow and we're basically stalling. And I'm going to go full burner to all the way to the stops, and we're going to climb. Because what we're trying to do is show off the power of these engines, that we can basically go from this really crazy high alpha flight regime into a vertical climb, regain the airspeed we need, and go right back into maneuvering. So we're going to go full burners, keep the nose high, and then once we've kind of caught the jet, you can get a feel for when that happens. The controls will be a little bit easier. Then that happens around 140-ish knots. You can introduce more pull because we want to establish a 60-degree nose-high climb. And then once the nose crosses 60, and you probably have noticed that the bug that tells us where our jet is going is nowhere to be found, because it's probably down here somewhere, because we're flying forward and our alpha is so high. But this is where our nose is pointing, the W. And so when that crosses the 60-degree nose high mark, then we will roll the jet over to the left with a full kick of left rudder to get the tail to skid out. And it looks really cool from crowd. You probably saw it earlier in the video when we did the crowd line shot. We'll get that skid effect, and then we will try to level the wings on the horizon inverted and establish contact with number 5. There's a lot going on there, but we'll walk through it. When I unpause, we should be right into that clear, so the knock it off call. So number 5 will call knock it off, and we will smoke off and begin that full burner climb. Knock it off, and there's the climb. We're pulling to 60. And then nose cross to 60, and we're coming left, full left rudder, and I'm looking over my shoulder to find there's number 5, contact. And I'm back in the HUD to establish wings level on the horizon, full push to catch it. Still full burner, just gonna fly it out. And then right around 300 knots, you see I began the roll. Once I've got 300 knots, then I'll roll onto the knife edge, and then I'm gonna look to rejoin with number 5 down there. And so I'll just stay on the knife edge and then chase him around the corner. And we're using our BFM tactics theory, so we're thinking about different pursuit curves, and in this case we want to get lead pursuit on him. We want to put our flight path vector ahead of his jet so we can catch him more quickly. So we're rolling out, we're just watching on the knife edge. We're going to bring that nose past him so that we're on a good intercept vector. And then I like to stay above him and cross above him before I roll out on the same heading as he is. is. And at this point, he's got lead, so he'll be giving all those radio calls about his airspeed and when he's rolling out. So he will let me know what's going on. And the contract speed that he's looking for is probably about 350 to 380. I don't remember where he likes to be. It's different than the profiles that I fly. But I know that I need to be about 50 to 80 knots faster than him in order to catch him. And so even if he's doing 380, we're still probably in the right ballpark doing 420 here. But we're going to have to do a little bit of work to make sure that the rejoin is smooth. So he's also going to be looking to roll out on the crowd right heading for the next maneuver, which is the section breakout, and that is 244. So I also kind of have that in the back of my mind as I'm looking for the rejoin, and I know that we're going to roll out pretty soon here. And I want to roll out to his right. It's fine if I cross him and I'm pretty wide, because then I can kind of work it in on that 45 angle along his wings, like we did for the rejoin before the Fortis. So he's rolling out. We're rolling out as well. He calls his airspeed. It's probably about 350, 360, and so I'm slowing down to try and catch him, and then I'm just riding the angle in to establish myself on his wing. And then as soon as I am about here, about in, I will call, "You've got two," and he will respond with his call sign to let me know that he heard me. And there we go. And we're in formation, ready for the next maneuver. So that is how we fly the Section High Alpha. It is a challenge and a half, but it looks super cool and it feels cool. You feel like a real fighter jockey because you're doing some nuts things with a big, expensive, multi-million-dollar aircraft. It looks great from the crowd. It's a crowd pleaser. The jets are slow. They're loud. You've got a power move at the end with that 60-degree climb. And once you learn to get the jet into the high alpha regime pretty consistently, it's actually not that hard. It's just a matter of doing it in a predictable, consistent manner. So again, get in the jet, get those reps, rock the show. Demo.
Big hick.
All right, let's take a look at a section high alpha pass from that Kobaletti show from a few months ago that we've been using for examples in previous videos. The things to watch for here are the angle of bank and airspeed that I'm using to get a good turn in for center point, and then the vertical velocity indicator and the heading tape once we get into the high alpha regime. You want both of those to be as stable as possible to fly a good pass.
So as we're behind the crowd setting up this section high alpha. Easing power, and we're coming left. Easing more power to idle. A little further left comes the pole. A little more left. A little more pull. Stand by the boards. We're easing the pull and rolling out. Set. Keeping that nose low attitude. Stand by the boards 3 miles. A little pull to level, easing more power. Easing even more power. Power set, 185. 180, a little more pull. 175. 170. 65. 160. 155. 150, a little more pull. 145. There's 140 pull into the set. And setting it, adding power. We're flying it, smoke on. Easing a little power.
Center point. Knock it off.
Left. Pull into 60. 60, coming left.
Chariot's braking left. 380. Sorry, 280. 300. 310. Ease in the pull. 320. Ease in more pull.
Contact.
330. Ease in power. 335. 340. Ease in more pull. 345. 350. Ease in power. Ease in the pull and rolling out. Coming in a little right.
You got 2
Easing
chariot.
a little power. 360 chariot. State 50.
State is 5-3.
Rolling out. Soldier behind the crowd, setting up the section break out.
And that's how the Legacy Blue Solos perform the Section High Alpha Pass. If you enjoyed this video, consider hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel, where you can find the rest of the Legacy Blue Solos tutorial series, as well as full side-by-side show sequences and debriefs. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the flight line.